I did start a project called Looking for Angola, and it traces the existence of an 1800s Black Seminole settlement that stretched into Sarasota. This Looking for Angola story talks about Underground Railroad south that we don't really hear about so much.
What is the impact for us moving forward? Why do this work other than just to discover the history?
If we had to risk our lives, for our freedom, because freedom meant so much.
How do we move forward in telling that history and using it? I think what you're putting forward is a prime example of blueprints for success.
Do not sit there depressed, just waiting on someone, throw you a carrot. Get out there. We got the grant. It was only $24,000 from the state of Florida.
We want equity, we want the same things. We want to live our lives. We want to live in peace. We want to live in joy.
We have AI and all the chatbots. I didn't have these chatbots at the time. I had Google. I did a lot of Google.
AI is a game changer, I think, for businesses.
They lock the door, we change the code. Yeah. Bill Black, break locks, no handouts, we bought the block. Bill Black, take spice, no gatekeep, we run the lot. They shut the gate, we change the code, turn small ideas into overload. No commission, we on the flow, independent, that CEO. Media says what I name it grade, built the lane and paid the way. From the block, the boring plays on everything, generational play. Bill Black, break chain, no cash given, we made our lane. Bill Black on everything.
Stop building hype and start building black. It's time to learn how much your hustle is truly worth. Hustle Worth is a free app designed to help you determine the exact value of your business or side hustle. Just answer a few questions, and our AI uses reliable valuation models used by top investment banks and venture capital firms. Get a clear understanding of exactly how much you could potentially cash out if you sold your brand today. It's a great way to see where you are and identify the exact gaps you need to fill to get to where you want to be. From side hustle to life-changing exit. That's the power of knowing your worth. Know your worth. Visit hustleworth.app and start building your legacy today.
Hey y'all, this is Robin White for the Build Black Show. Welcome everybody. We thank you for being here today. And today we are with Vicki Oldham, who is a prominent Sarasota historian, journalist, and the community leader serving as president and CEO of the Sarasota African American Cultural Coalition, correct?
Right.
Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I would like to say prominent and curious resident of Florida.
That's right, because you were born and raised here, weren't you?
Yes, I was born and raised right here in Sarasota, right in the community that I researched.
Oh, that's wonderful. Tell us a little bit about your research and what you've done and what you've uncovered, because I know that there's a digital library and trolley tours and markers and all sorts of stuff. I've only been here for 7 years and I've seen a profound change.
Right. Well, I've started a couple of projects. So if you're talking about Newtown Alive and this community, I'd be happy to talk about that. I did start a project called Looking for Angola, and it traces the existence of an 1800s Black Seminole settlement that stretched into Sarasota.
Let's talk about all of it. Let's give us some bits and pieces of both of it, because what you're doing, I think, is profoundly important for communities around the country who are finding more and more of their histories hidden and are uncovering it. And it's impactful in how we move forward as communities and building businesses.
It really, really is. I was going through a transition in my life, a career transition, when I was asked to do a documentary short about the history of Blacks in the Sarasota community. So I hung out at the Sarasota History Center reading all that I could read about when Black people originally settled here. I had read in this book called Florida's Peace River Frontier by a man, an author Dr. Cantor Brown, he wrote about this Black Seminole settlement that was here in 1812 and existed until 1821, until this community was annihilated by indirectly by the provisional governor of Florida, Andrew Jackson. And the story was fascinating to me, and it touched my heart because these people were survivors and they had to thrive on their own with very little intervention from anybody else. They were coming from chattel slavery on plantations in Georgia, Alabama, those southern states, Mississippi and so forth, and they ran into Florida, which was Spanish at the time. And the way that they survived and even continued after their torching touched me in a very, very deep way. And some of them survived and moved into further into Central Florida. Some continued south where Key Biscayne is, and they crossed the Gulf Stream and ended up into Red Bay's Andros Island in the Bahamas. And I was going through this transition and I'm thinking, well, gosh, these people survived. You better find a way to survive just like they did. And that is what started this exploration of the Looking for Angola project. I wanted to learn more about them, and I did. And turns out there was no archaeology, or very, very little archaeology done to prove that they existed. And so I wrote a grant.
Of course.
With a committee of scholars. I pulled some scholars together and said, this is a story that I think should be told. And lo and behold, we got the grant. It was only $24,000 from the state of Florida. And we were off and running to tell that story. And I learned a lot about how to tell these stories through that project. I learned to just continue to develop it and make it expand. We started out doing archaeology because for that time period, you have to have physical evidence to really, really prove that people were here. Black people were here. So that was important. I had no idea, didn't know anything about archaeology. I was a journalist, but curious.
But that I think is the part that really made all of this happen, is the curiosity.
Oh, absolutely.
First of all, let me ask you, are some of them in the Bradenton area? Is there?
So that is where we did archaeology.
Okay.
In East Bradenton, near the river there.
Right.
Because people fished for a living, and it was just easier to live right there. And that is where they traded with the British. The Seminoles were here, and it was a very international, diverse community, something that we, a taboo term these days, but that community was very, very diverse, and folks were getting along, and surviving.
And you talk about this being them trading with the Seminoles and the British then.
Mm-hmm.
So they established commerce that certainly is a way of living, but
yeah,
what?
And that is and their influence expanded and got the attention of U.S. Troops.
So tell me more, in what way?
That work. All of this trading going on and this relationship that these formerly enslaved people had with the Brits, who were using that waterway and, with their big ships and everything coming in there. The influence spread and the troops heard about it, and it got back to the provisional governor of Florida, Andrew Jackson, that this settlement was thriving and prospering. Well, can't be. Not formerly enslaved people.
It's a problem.
And at the time, Florida was being handed over, from Spanish-owned to, the U.S. And so it was a perfect storm. And he ordered their annihilation, their torching, just like Rosewood. And many men, women, and children died, but a remnant escaped into Central Florida and then ended up moving south. And so this Looking for Angola story talks about Underground railroad south that we don't really hear about so much.
There's been so much history here. You and I have talked about Newtown Alive and another show. What is the impact for us moving forward? Why do this work other than just to discover the history?
Right.
How does this help us progress in terms of Black community and developing Black community and building?
I can speak to this issue personally.
Okay.
I said that I was going through a career transition. This story shared important messages with me that I needed to hear. You've got to find a way and make a way and get going. Do not sit there depressed, and just waiting on someone to, throw you a carrot. Get out there. You've got skills. These people understood their talents and their skills. And you have to pardon me because I get real energetic about this. We have innate skills that we brought over from Africa. And skills with our hands, with our brains. We understand how to enterprise and make things that were small, bigger. We can find our way. We navigated our way down south to Key Biscayne, and then saw some dugout boats there and decided we were going to get on those dugout boats and head that way.
Wherever it took us.
Right.
Exactly.
If we had to risk our lives, for our freedom, because freedom meant so much and means so much, then so be it. That is the story that touched me. That is the story that touched me and got me on path. I found what I was supposed to be doing, the next step of my career. And, that story just kept always nudging. We not only did archaeology, we started having public programs to teach community residents about the importance of archaeology. Because as a journalist, if I didn't know anything about archaeology, then, people in our community, chances are they didn't know either about the importance of this. And so while I'm teaching, I'm learning too, because the scholars, the humanities scholars, the professors of history and the professors of anthropology, and archaeologists, they were teaching me. And it was just really a big old learning experience that I enjoyed. And I felt like if this story changed my life, then it can change children's lives who don't think that they have any skills or any worth or don't know the direction that they should go in, or even adults who are in some transitionary periods and have no clue about what to do. There's so much that can be applied. And so that's what I set out to do. And then I ended up getting a big job. I feel like it was a big job. I was a marketing director at an HBCU out of the state of Florida, in Georgia, a preeminent historian who researched Florida history, learned about this Looking for Angola project that I had started, because we were getting a lot of media coverage.
Oh, I'm sure.
Even the BBC covered it.
Wow.
And so he was like, well, goodness, if you can market this little known, underreported story in history that was only in dusty academic and scholarly journals, then maybe you can market this Black university.
Oh, okay.
This Black university. So he became president of a Black university called Fort Valley State University, and hired me to be his marketing director. I had never been the marketing director of any university. I had never been a marketing director of anything. I was a journalist, remember, a TV news journalist. But my skills, all of the skills that I learned in storytelling applied, because that's how we do as Black people.
But telling those stories, those narratives, I think are, I believe that they're essential. I'm a storyteller, so as many people will attest to, I don't know how to stop talking sometimes. But telling those stories resonate. And hearing something like this, you in particular, who had such a public face in terms of being a journalist, people knew you. They would expect that that would be it. That's, you reached the pinnacle of success in terms of a lot of people's eyes. But to hear that you're making a transition, that you've moved forward and that you've changed, pivoted when the time came, I think that that's essential for a lot of us who are trying to figure out, how do we do the next step? How do we navigate these spaces where our stories are being diminished, shut down, rebranded, reframed? How do we move forward if we don't have that history? How do we move forward in telling that history and using it? I think what you're putting forward is a prime example of blueprints for success, because you're talking about a people who were enslaved, who were brought here, and generations enslaved, got their freedom, found a way forward, found a way to utilize the gifts and talents that were inherently theirs, and then use them to build commerce and structure and community. And how do we do that?
You know, you mentioned some key points. How did I pivot and how do you do it? Well, you start small, a little bit at a time. You start with the resources that you have. I had no resources initially, but I started asking questions of people that I felt had answers. So I went to the nearby college and I asked a professor of history who was an archaeologist, hey, this story of Angola needs to be told. Do you know anything about this story? He knew a little bit about it. Can you help me tell this story? How about can you help me write this grant? How about you take question number 1, 2, and 3, because these have everything to do with your expertise. And I'll take question number, whatever, 4, 5, and 6, because, they're asking some questions that I can answer. And oh, by the way, do you know anybody else who can join us in this quest?
And building those networks, not being afraid to ask for help, not being afraid to feel like, you're the dumbest person in the room. Like so many times we feel like we have to come and we have to be everything and we have to be so prepared. And I think for a lot of us, that ends up being our downfall. Not knowing when to ask for help, not knowing when to coalesce so that we can be stronger together. And I think that you did an excellent job of doing that, both in this and I know in the Newtown project as well.
I didn't know anything about Angola or 1800s Florida history, but we have so many resources now. We have, we have AI and all the chatbots. I didn't have these chatbots at the time. You know what I mean? I had Google. I did a lot of Googling, but I loved going to the Sarasota History Center and being among all of those history books. And there was this old history book smell in there. And, I was surrounded by other historians that were interested in maybe not the specific story that I was interested in, but they were interested in history in general. And they helped me. They allowed me to enter their circle and, just took me in, and I became a part of this family of historical preservationists and actually loved it. And so one thing led to the other. That Looking for Angola project got me that job at Fort Valley State University, a top job on the president's leadership team.
That's a big deal. That is a big deal. It also allows you and I applaud that. I think that's amazing. It's absolutely brilliant. Believe me, when you and I get a chance to talk, we'll talk about how I landed here. But one of the things that I see in all of this, in all of the work that you're doing, is uncovering this history that has been so integral to Sarasota and this area.
And nobody had done it.
Nobody had done it. But the structure is there, the framework is there, the history is there, the pride is there.
Oh, yeah.
For what has been accomplished in these communities.
Yeah.
And for me, I grew up in a very similar neighborhood in Roxbury, Massachusetts. And we see bits and pieces. We see, a small business here. We see a storefront there. But you even mentioned AI. AI is a game changer, I think, for businesses because it allows us to do so much more with so much little resources, so fewer resources than we've had before. I think that what you're doing is remarkable. I think that as you continue to move forward and uncover these histories, that we can learn so much about who we are and what's been poured into us, who we are as a people, and have that help us move forward, not only in building communities, but in building businesses that sustain those communities.
I have to say this about growing up in a city like Sarasota and why this history is important. We have a very small African American community here. And growing up as a girl, you didn't, outside of your community, say at school, I saw a few Black teachers and a few people outside of the community in control. In the Black community, we saw leaders, straight up, activists doing what activists do, making a way for us, opening up access. But when you moved outside of that Black community, you're like, well, we're not in these spaces. Why? And it makes you feel a certain way. It does impact your confidence as a young person. It really does. It may have had a tendency to make me feel a little less than, because we weren't in those spaces. But when I started learning what these Black people did in our community to fight off those troops, to survive, to thrive, when I started finding out and understanding more, I might have known it a little bit, but understanding how they opened up the beaches and what their strategy was and what the tactics were and how they had to file a federal lawsuit against the city of Sarasota to open up access so that we can seat a Black city commissioner. The tactics that they used, they understood that the numbers were against them. They ran a candidate. The candidate couldn't win because they were outnumbered. That gave them ammunition to file that federal lawsuit. A judge sided with them. We have a Black city commissioner as a result of this work. When I start seeing all of this work going on, I was like, oh.
Again, coalitions. And it's applaud the communities for being able to do what they did and utilizing the government's own tactics to obtain what they needed to obtain. One of the things that I really believe in is that we need to rely on each other more. We need to go back to those spaces where we are building with one another, trusting one another, leaning towards one another, to grow. We were stronger when we were focused inward.
Oh, yeah.
And as soon as we start moving outward and looking to be
isolated.
and assimilation, I get it. We want equity. We want the same things. We want to live our lives. We want to live in peace. We want to live in joy and build and grow and expand and see our children thrive. A lot of that, I think, needs to come from working together in ways that you have in uncovering this histories and certainly in knowing where we came from. So I want to thank you for that. And I want to thank you for sharing that with us today.
And I've got to say that, as you say, there were people who helped me along the way, volunteers from various organizations. There was a task force that was set up of African American pioneers who kept me on the path, because when sometimes you don't know what you don't know, but you have to have these pioneers and leaders who lived it so that they could really tell you what happened, because especially when there's not many books and accounts in the books. So you've got to depend on these coalitions to help.
Absolutely. And you've had good community support.
Oh, definitely.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us. And I look forward to having more conversations with you as time progresses and we learn more.
And I look forward to helping more African American communities share their history. I want to help communities do exactly what I have: the historic markers, the book, the podcast, the physical structure of an art center and history museum, the websites, the mobile apps, the coloring books, everything.
Everything. And that's one thing we didn't even touch on is the museum that you're working on building.
Yeah.
Listen, y'all, we're going to have to do a round two with this one here because we barely scratched the surface. But I thank you so much for joining us, Vicki Oldham.
Thank you.
I big fan since I met her in 2017.
Thank you so much.
But I really value and appreciate all that you bring to the table for our communities. And listen, y'all, if you're looking for her, you can find her at...
You can find me. I can be emailed. My first name, last name, the number 1 at Gmail. VICKIEOLDHAM, the number 1 at gmail.com, or newtownalive.org is the website, newtownalive.org. And then there's the SAC.com, stands for the Sarasota African American Cultural Coalition. There's a lot of information on those websites.
Thank you so much. Find her, work with her. We appreciate you. Have
Thank
a
you.
good day.
All right.
This is Robin White for the Build Black Show. Build Black, own everything.
They lock the door, we change the code. Yeah. Yeah. Build black, break locks, no handouts, we bought the block. Build black, take spice, no gatekeep, we run the lot. They shut the gate, we change the code, turn small like this in the overload. No commission, we on the flow. Independent, that CEO. Media says what I name it grade. Built the lane and paved the way. From the block, the boring plays on everything. Generational play, build black, break chain. No cash given, we made our lane. Build black on everything.